Well, there are already some tools laying out here. Actually, the only thing I've done so far is remove the battery. This is Sandy's jet ski. She's actually had some problems with it, with the starter. The starter one-way gear keeps going out. And I replaced the starter one-way gear, didn't fix it. I replaced the flywheel part. It worked for, what, one trip?
Yeah.
One trip out on the river, and then she started not starting again, and right now it won't even, well actually, let me hook the battery back up and I'll show you exactly what it's doing.
It gives me a warning when it's getting ready to go out. It's, anybody else, if they're just on the ski, they probably wouldn't even notice it, but since I ride it all the time, it just made a noise.
Extra clunk.
Yeah, there was just something extra to it.
Whenever it was starting.
And then it'd start a few times after that, and then finally it just gets where it doesn't start anymore.
Tighten the battery back up just a little bit. And like anything, you're always supposed to unhook the battery before you work on anything, so I had the battery unhooked. Which in this case, you actually have to unhook the ground cable when you pull the motor out, because it comes out with it. You can hear the starter working. Yeah. And every now and then, you maybe get it. It's not even going to catch it all now. It's like the one-way starter gear is not grabbing. So we actually did I did a post on the Yamaha group and showed them kind of what I was dealing with. No one really had an answer. It was kind of back and forth on what the problem was. I'll show you what the problem is when I get it out. I finally have figured out the problem. That Sandy, of course, happens to have a odd duck engine in her jet ski. So this is an MR1, but I'll show you the difference when we get it taken apart. So I'm just going to go ahead and start taking it apart. I have had this motor out, twice or three times already?
Yeah.
For doing the starter, which you have, in order to get the starter gear, unless you want to take all the exhaust and everything off and all the gaskets and that kind of stuff, pull the engine. The last time when I pulled the engine, 15 minutes is all it took me. But I had pulled it 3 times that weekend. So
he knew exactly how to do it.
This should take me 20, 30 minutes to pull the engine. They're fairly straightforward. And the way I'm pulling it apart, I don't have to have any new gaskets or anything like that. So I'm going to start taking everything apart. Now this is the hardest part of doing these. Actually, it's not the removal, it's the putting it back on. I got all the bolts and everything removed now. I got the fuel lines unhooked, throttle cable unhooked. This little guy right here.
You're spilling fuel.
Oh yeah, I'm spilling full of fuel. But this little guy right here, this little vent line, it is impossible to get a finger or a hand down to slide the little vent line back onto this. This takes me longer putting it back together than pulling the entire engine and putting this one little hose on here. And it's just a little breather line. But that's what takes all the time.
So if anybody knows a trick that we're missing.
And you can't say get smaller hands, because that's not going to work.
Is it this line right here? Well, you're not here. This line?
Yeah, that one right there.
And you can't get your hand.
No, because by the time you get it
even
down
if I'm
here,
on that side and reach around, I wouldn't be able to help?
It goes right about there.
So there's no room.
There's just no room to get to it.
Get over there.
So I'm not quite sure what they were thinking there, but it does not work very well.
So if somebody's learned a trick, let us know.
Okay. Also, too, this is going to be a little faster for us to remove it because I've already had it out so many times. I've actually marked all of my hoses and all of my wires. Everything I've already color-coded zip ties, which most of these can only go in one place anyway, but that way it's really, really quick to identify red goes to red. Unplug it. This one was obvious. It was green versus green, so I didn't put anything on it.
Yeah, and the only problems with this jet ski it's this starter issue. And I say starter, it's not the actual starter, it's that gear, but.
Brown. Now I do have a new oil pressure sensor for this, because her oil warning light does come on for a minute whenever she goes to start it right off when it's cold. It has good oil pressure, it just, the light comes on, so I did buy a new one. I can't believe that it cost $75 for the little oil pressure sensor, which I know I could find a generic from like O'Reilly's for like $7. But
and it's one of those, didn't have to have it, but it's annoying, especially if you're at a crowded ramp. Like whenever we go to the Panama City Beach area, you know, the ramps are always busy. You start it and it starts this really loud, obnoxious beeping. And if you don't shut it off, it kills it, basically. So you got to shut it off, let everything kind of reset, then start it and get it warmed up. Normally we try to kind of remember it while it's still on the trailer before we even take it off, kind of get it started, warm it up, and then it's not as bad, but it's just really annoying at the busier ramps.
Alright, so now I'm having fun. I got all the hoses undone, got all the water lines undone. Actually, I say all the hoses. There's actually one water line at the bottom that you have to pick the motor up before you can get to. Now into the fun part of taking off the 4 motor mounts. One I can get to with my little impact with no problem. 3 of them, on the other hand, are wrench and socket ratchet for 1. So this takes a little bit of time. Some of the people who have never had them out before, sometimes these things are frozen in there and they're horrible to get out. Fortunately, this one has actually been fairly good to me. In part, whenever we bought this, it did have a brand new engine put in it. So it had been out then even. So now every time I take it out, it's still pretty easy. But you gotta be a contortionist, and when you have hands as big as mine, it makes it really difficult to get into some of these little spaces. So ratchet a lot of times, other times I gotta use little stubby wrenches just to get in there, get enough room to do stuff. Kind of doing 2 videos at once here, so I'm actually doing a jet ski video. So you want to see me pulling a jet ski engine and fixing that, you can look at that video. And if you're here watching the jet ski video, you can watch my winch video. But
the winch review video.
Yeah, winch review video. This will be his first test pulling this ski out, or motor out, so.
Which for the jet ski people, yes, we have done a test with something much heavier than a jet ski engine.
Okay, well, it's up. It's unconnected there. Now I got my room, I can go ahead and hook my last hose down here. This is so much easier than last time.
Yes.
Last time I used a block and tackle, which
And a
wasn't
tractor.
really a block and tackle. It was a couple pulleys that I had that I put together into a shape of a block and tackle. It did work, but
And a tractor bucket system.
yeah, and the tractor wasn't real happy about it either because I had to go up so high and reaching out so far. And then I was pulling on it. It did not find that enjoyable. And I do suggest too, if you ever have to change a starter on one of these things, just go ahead and pull the motor. Because in case some people are looking at this too, this is actually the starter location. It's right directly behind this. So unless you have much smaller hands than me, I don't even know how you could get it out with smaller hands, because you got to pull straight out on it. Once you get the bolts out, I don't even know how it would be possible to get it out of there. Okay, so I skipped one step there. After I pulled the motor out, I pulled the end cover off. I think you may have got a couple pictures of it. That's got a big O-ring in it, and it does help hold the oil back from that's in the case. So when you pull it off, there is going to be a little bit of oil that comes out. Obviously, you're not going to want to try to save this. So this is the problem right here, which this is the gear 3, I believe, because their starter comes here, turns this gear. And then this is a one-way bearing, so this should only be able to free spool one direction. And that's kind of that sound that Sandy heard whenever she was trying to start it right there. So now I got to pull the flywheel off, and then I'll kind of bring you in closer and show you exactly what this one was doing. And so if you guys run across this problem, you'll know too. I didn't think that was going to work.
That one's always been a pain.
Okay, which we needed both of us, didn't set a thing up, but we were able to use a 3-jaw puller. Pop the flywheel off. Which, when you use the 3-jaw puller on these, don't just put it in the end after you take the bolt out. You got to put the bolt back in. So put the threads in most of the way. That way you're not reaching in there and stripping out the threads and boogering stuff up. So that's what we do. And there's my one-way bearing, which, yeah, those are already all flat-sided, and they have less than an hour's worth of riding on it.
Yeah, it was one day.
Yeah.
Because the river was even so low, we couldn't do a whole lot of riding.
So this one here will get replaced with, now this was a brand new one, but, and I got it from Yamaha. It was actually, I think, $280 for it. This time when I ordered this new part, which I'll show you here in a second, I ordered the used part because you could not find these new. And he had one of these used to match it, so he just went ahead and shipped me that with it. So, okay, now this is the issue. I posted a bunch of pictures about this, and everyone thought it was normal, but to me it did not make sense to be normal, but I went with it. Having this much play in that gear in the shaft. Everyone said, oh, it's normal because it rides on the crankshaft. Well, if that was the case, my whole thought was, then why does this have an oil passage through that? I'm like, that's what that is. That's for oil to come out of here and run through it. But everyone thought, oh, that was normal. Well, it's not normal. 2 different crankshafts you can have on the same motor. If you see here, this one has a step to it, and this step means it takes the other crankshaft, or the other I keep saying flywheel, but starter gear. But you can see that step right there. I'll show you the differences in the two. There's not much, but I'll show you the differences, and then you see how this one fits. I haven't even tried the other one yet. I'm gonna go grab it right now, unpackage it, and try it, and we'll see how it works. All right, so this is the part that I ordered from the jet ski store. The people at SPT turned me on to them. This was an SPT engine. I called them when I was having these problems trying to figure out what the heck's going on, and they turned me onto the website, and there was an option where you picked your crankshaft if you ordered your crankshaft, and the crankshaft, you had an option if you had the groove or if you didn't have the groove. And they needed to know that because these are different. Oil passage in that one, this one has dimples in it. So there's not much difference. This is just a one-way bearing. I've just got it on here so I don't get it dirty. But there's just a little bit of difference in size. So you saw how loose this one was. Now that one,
No play at all.
no play at all. That's gonna be the problem. Which was amazing. This is the one that I replaced the old one with. And the old, let me get up for a second. The old one's been kind of laying outside for a while because I knew I wasn't no good. But this was one that I had pulled off of it. This one did work for a year.
Yeah, I used it a lot and had no problems.
And it is the same one as I replaced it with. It's got the passage in it. So, needless to say, now we know what the problem is. That definitely fits much nicer. No play, no flopping around.
Now here's my fear. This one, that's the wrong part there,
Yep.
the first one. But it lasted a year, a lot of starts.
Mm-hmm.
This one didn't last long. Could there be a chance using these wrong parts damaged
No,
some? Okay.
because it wasn't actually touching anything there. Everything is touching, I'm replacing.
Okay. I wonder why that one didn't last long.
I don't know. I think just more than anything, I got this one used. This replacement part, I got used. This
So
one
it
was-
already had more wear than...
Yeah, and this
that
one
one.
probably was a new one, so it already had more wear. And just luck. I think it will be a lot of
Okay.
it. But so now I got some extra parts, which are not good for anything, because they just chewed up. But so that's going to be so much nicer. And here's that one-way bearing. You can see right here, I can turn this with my hand freely this way, but I cannot turn it backwards. That's how the starter works, because when the starter turns that, I'm going to see if I can hold it all here. Well, I'll show you more once I put the flywheel and stuff back on, and I got to bolt this to the flywheel. Use these bolts, bolt the one-way gear to it. Once I get that done, I put it back on, then I'll show you how the starter system works. And I did just notice this. This is a Yamaha MR1. That's a Mitsubishi. That says Mitsubishi right there. But, okay, I'm going to bolt that up real fast. That's not too interesting, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that real fast, and then we'll get back. All right, so I went ahead and bolted the one-way gear back on. Bolted this guy back on. So now you can see how this works. Here's where your starter comes in, this hole right here. And the starter turns this gear. This is the free spool way. This doesn't do anything. But if you go the other direction with it, I cannot rotate this without rotating the entire engine over.
And you could do it before with the other.
Yeah, and that's what the one-way gear does. So when your starter engages, it actually pushes up on this guy, and it pulls down on this guy and turns the motor. When the motor's running, then it lets it free spool. So now there's no resistance and your starter's not running all the time. It uses that one-way bearing. It's always got contact, but it doesn't engage until it turns the starter turns it, but the motor can't turn the starter, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, so now I'm going to go ahead and bolt the cover back on and change my oil pressure sending unit, which I think is this guy right here. I really am not 100% sure. I'll figure that out after I get the cover put back on and get it buttoned up. I don't like to leave this open too long. I don't want bugs, gnats, sand, that kind of stuff to get in there. So I'm trying to be as clean as possible. Yes, I know it's not perfect, but it's good enough for a 2006 Yamaha. Okay, one thing about when you pull these engines out, they'll have shims under the motor mounts. Make sure you put them back where you took them out of and keep a track of how many there is. Some skis have 3 or 4 stacked up. Some have none, some have 1. This ski in particular has 3 underneath 3 mounts and none underneath 1. If you're putting a ski motor in or ski engine in, and you don't know what it's going to take, what you have to do is kind of slide them together, set them down, and you want no tension between the coupling. Should be all just, it needs to be in there straight. Shouldn't be binding up at all. And that's what the shims are for. Just, raise up the back, tilt it, just whatever it needs. Generally speaking, when you pull the same motor out of the ski and you're putting it right back in, put the shims in the exact same spot and you're good. Okay. Well, I got the basics all put back together, all the wires plugged back in, all the hoses ran. I had the water box unhooked, so I got that hooked back up. Injectors are plugged back in. I am going to put some oil in it, and then we're going to see what happens. If I can, I don't have any fingernails, so I'll just shove me a screwdriver in there. And just remember, you spill a little bit, it doesn't matter, just a little rust proofing. Now, a lot of times when you have the motor pulled out like this and you drain all the oil out of the bottom of it, it'll actually take more than what comes in your kit, because the kit, they know you're going to suck it out and you're never going to get it all out. I sucked it out, and I had almost 4 quarts I sucked out of it last time, and then I opened it up to change that starter gear, and at least 2 more came out. So okay, so I just got done. I put 4 quarts in. I'm going to hook the battery up, and then we're going to try it. And it may take a minute to hit off, just for the sure fact that all the fuel system was empty and that kind of stuff. It says fuel injection, so it should pump up, but it may take a second to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and hook the battery back up, and we'll see what happens. If it starts, I'm just going to let it start for just a second. I'm not going to let it run for a long time. Because if it does start, then we'll take it out, hook the water hose to it. And
see if it even sounds the same.
Yeah. We're wondering if it's going to sound a little different now that that gear is not just grinding itself to pieces every time it ran.
Sorry to say, my 4-wheeler. My jet ski always had a whine.
It almost sounded like supercharged.
Yeah, like a supercharger, and it's not. Doesn't happen.
And we've never drove one of these before, so that could be a totally normal sound, or it could be something weird. So, battery's hooked up. Only bolts I have left over here is for the little car house brace to bolt between the two. I guess I'll bump the key just for a second to make sure I don't have any fuel leaking out of the fuel line there. You hear the fuel pump. Pressure. I'm going to do that a couple times. Fuel pump ran. I guess let's see what happens. Do we have a fire extinguisher? There's a fire extinguisher over there just in case.
And one right inside the door.
And one right inside the door. Okay. Don't see any fuel leaking. Throttle cable works. Sounds good.
It doesn't have that whine.
I can't tell because of the way that they're rattly when they're out of the water and open. This thing is incredibly loud without the box on the top. I mean, it is definitely loud.
Yeah, it's loud.
Intake louder than anything else. Intake has such a sharp whine to it. My ears are ringing. But though it does start, so that's always a good, I mean. And I know it'll take a second to clean itself out, or not clean itself out, but to get fuel to all the injectors and everything. So
Okay.
I guess now I need to button it back up. We need to take it down to the water and at least back it in and just run it. All right, so we made it to the ramp, and now it is time to try it out. And needless to say, I'm wearing a full wetsuit because it's not that warm today. Sounds good. All right, well, like I said, our video got a little short there. We started raining as we were out riding. I said we were out riding, I was out riding. But we got it all back together. Now the starter gear is perfect. I mean, it just
no problem at all.
starts up no problem. It just, as soon as you hit the key, it fires right up. Everything runs great now. So that part was a success. So now at least I know what the problem is, and hopefully this may help somebody else out. So thanks for watching, and like I said, thanks to SBT. They're the ones that called to kind of got me straightened out on what parts or why I was having problems. They're the only ones that finally could tell me about the two different crankshafts. They, on their website, if you look at the crankshafts, it showed the two options, and luckily the guy I talked to there in tech, he knew exactly what the problem was. Or not, he didn't know what the problem was, but he knew that there was a difference. And
yeah, nobody else has known that.
yeah, nobody else has known that. And then he referred me to, because that part, you cannot buy that new starter gear anywhere. So he turned me onto the jet ski store, able to find it used. So can't argue with that. Ended up buying it on a Friday and it came out on Monday, so fast shipping. He had it in his hand. And not to mention, even the original factory parts was way, way, way cheaper. It's used, but it's good used, so thanks both you guys for that, and thanks for watching.